6 o'clock. Are you with me? All right. So today we are going to get started with some answers to your questions about how is tea made? How does it become a fresh, glossy leaf and become this beautiful little dried up, flavorful, aromatic oolong, or a plain, beautiful white tea that doesn't have hardly any processing going on. Or maybe it'll become a twisted little black leaf that's going to have this robust flavor, or it's going to have a buttery flavor. So how does it become that? How can all of this come from one leaf? So my name is Dina Cataldo, and I'm the director of Sicilian Tea Company. And last week, we started a series of Facebook Lives talking all about tea. And last week, we talked about what are the 6 main types of tea. And we got a little bit into how they're made. And we'll talk more and more about more particular teas. But this week, we are going to talk about the 6 stages of processing. Well, I want to know a little bit about you. So if you're listening, I want to hear you say hi, see you say hi, and tell me what tea you're drinking. Right now I am having a caffeine-free rooibos that I blended myself, and it will not keep me up tonight because it's a little late for me. It's 6 p.m. and we're going to be here every 6 p.m. on Tuesdays to chat about tea for a while. So say hi in the comments, let me know you're here. Last week we talked about what the definition of tea was. And so this rooibos that I'm drinking, not a tea. What is a tea? A tea comes from one particular plant, Camellia sinensis, and there's a couple of variations that most tea comes from. And so we talked a little bit about that. Everything else on the market that you see that's caffeine free, that's made from a plant, is considered a tisane, or an herbal tea is what we usually call it, but it's not really a tea. And we talked about those 6 main teas: green, white, yellow, oolong, black, and dark teas. So today we're going to talk about the fresh leaf to our cup. What's the process that gets us from one to the other? But first, why should we care about this process? It's important because it connects us. And there's a growing group of people in our society, and you might be one of them, I certainly am, who cares more and more about where our food is coming from. I think I really started caring about where my food came from when I started gardening a few years ago. I got my own home and I decided, you know what, I'm going to play with some gardening, and I grew some tomatoes and they were delicious. And I didn't understand why they didn't taste as good when I got them at the grocery store. And the reason is because the grocery store tomatoes were developed for a lot of purposes, mainly to get them from the field to the store without them being tarnished. They wanted them to look beautiful so that we would buy them. But in the process, as they began evolving those tomatoes, they lost a lot of their flavor. So one of the things that connects us to our food is knowing how it's grown, what's going on with it. And I learned that when we understand where our food is sourced and how it's created, we become more connected not only to the food that we're eating and putting into our body, but we're also connecting more with ourselves. A few years back, I went on a retreat and I learned about yogic eating. And if you don't know what yogic eating is, basically what it is having a meal in front of you and maybe taking a bite, and putting your fork down, chewing your food, and just taking it in, and not, continually stuffing food down our mouth, but really taking a moment to enjoy what we're eating and really to enjoy the entire process of eating. And that means thinking about where the food comes from and acknowledging that someone had to pick the food out in the field, and a lot of people were involved in the process of getting the food to us so that we could eat it in whatever meal that we're having. I have transferred that concept of yogic eating to tea. when I have a cup of tea, I like to know where it's grown. I like to know whose hands have been on the tea. I like to purchase tea for myself and also for my business when I know that that tea is coming from a place where people care about the workers and where the people who are picking the tea are as in love with the tea as I am. They're in love with the process. So taking that time, that moment just to connect with your food, to connect with your tea, helps because not only does it calm our body, but overall it will reduce our stress. It's impossible to feel stress when you're in the moment and you are acknowledging someone else and thanking somebody else for helping you. Because let's face it, most of us aren't out there in the fields getting food or picking our own tea and then processing our own tea so it comes to us. So it creates that connection between us, the people who are helping us with our food, and the food itself, what we're putting into our body. So that's what I'd like to do here is help create a connection maybe between you and tea. Maybe you love tea and aren't really familiar with the process. I know I wasn't until I started really looking into it and finding and sourcing tea, searching for a place that sources tea from really great places. So I'm still learning about it, but I'm going to give you the information that I have about how it's processed. So if you have any questions, throw them out there. If I can't answer them now, I will certainly answer them next week. So there's 6 steps to creating tea from the tea leaf to the dried leaf that we brew. The first is plucking. The second is withering. The third is rolling and shaping. The fourth is oxidizing. Fifth is de-enzyming, or what they call firing. It's heating the leaf. And then there's sorting, which is another important factor. So we'll probably only get to the first 3, and I want to give them enough time to really be meaningful to you. So let's start with plucking. So plucking is the most expensive part of creating a tea. It takes a lot of manpower, and you can use machines, and a lot of tea gardens do, but the machines are not always as great at getting those particular plucks that are going to make good quality teas. And there's several different kinds of plucks. So you might have heard of 2 leaves and a bud. Well, 2 leaves and a bud is a standard pluck. That's 2 leaves coming from the plant and then a rolled up bud that hasn't blossomed yet, and that's part of the tea plant. And what that's doing is balancing the flavor of the expected tea, the finished product, and the cost of tea, because it's so expensive to process. And it's kind of amazing when you think about how inexpensive tea is and how time-consuming the process is and how much manpower is needed to create the tea that we have in our cup. It's really amazing to think that we can get it for like really inexpensively cents for a cup of tea. It's amazing to me. So you'll have a person or a machine that is told how to pluck that day. So they're plucking flushes, and what a flush is the first green that comes off that season from the plant. So for instance, you might have heard Darjeeling's first flush or a second flush. The first flush is the first new growth off of a tea plant. And so when you're drinking a first flush Darjeeling, those were the first buds, the first leaves from the plants that season. Or a second flush, that's the second new growth of the season for that Darjeeling. So the plucks are divided into flushes. Now, in addition to the standard flush, you also have a fine standard pluck. There's a fine pluck. And in the fine pluck, you're taking 1 leaf and a bud. And so those are going to be more expensive. They're going to be a little bit more refined teas. When you get silver needle white teas, for instance, those are like the really expensive ones. Those are just the buds. And so the people who go out to pluck the buds, or the people who are sorting the leaves, or the machines that are sorting the leaves and the buds, divide the buds to create those silver needle teas. And then the leaves are valuable for other kinds of teas. oolongs, for example, you need more of those regular leaves rather than the buds to create the kinds of oolongs that you want to make, to get the kind of flavors that you want to get. So now, once they're plucked, the people who have plucked them have to be really careful with those leaves. They have to make sure they're not jostling them too much, because if they're not careful with them, the leaves bruise and they might be changing the characteristics of the tea in a way that won't be great for the finished product. They have to be really careful about how they're handling them. The chemistry of the leaf starts to change right away. As soon as that leaf is plucked, the chemistry starts to come into play, right? Like the biology, just like anything else, something starts dying, and that's what the leaf's doing. It's slowly dying. But then they have to catch it in that process, and then what they do is they manipulate, the manufacturers, the people who are handling the leaves, manipulate the processes to give us those flavors and aromas, to draw those flavors and aromas out that are going to be so desirable in those teas. And if you listen to last week's episode, you'll be able to hear a little bit about what is so desirable that they're pulling out of those leaves, what they're doing to do that. So after they've been plucked, they're taken to another location, the leaves are, and then they're withered. Withering, all it is really letting the leaves rest, but it's done in a very, it's a very thoughtful process, because depending on the tea that you're creating, you have to layer them so thick on the ground. You have to regulate the moisture in the air. So, for instance, if the leaves are being allowed to wither outside and they're getting enough air and they're getting enough sun, that's fine. But if it's not just right and the manufacturer doesn't believe that they're going to get the flavors or the aromas in the finished product that they need, they'll be moved to a room where the temperature and the humidity can be regulated. During the withering process, a lot of the moisture from the leaf is removed. This is just the first step in starting to have that moisture evaporate. And biologically, that leaf is just changing. And so the length of time of the wither is regulated depending on the tea. Physically, the leaf is becoming softer. This is a leaf from my camellia tree, not the same thing. You can't make tea with this. But I clipped it yesterday morning, and as you can see, it's really soft and pliable. If you take a tea leaf off of a plant right away, it will break. But if you allow it to wither, it allows the leaf that space to be rolled, to be manipulated, and not crack the leaf. And that's important, because when we get into the next steps, some leaves are intentionally creased and crushed to let oils be oxidized, to let oils be evaporated into the air in order to create certain aromas and flavors. So black teas are one of those. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But with the withering, the two processes that the people making the tea care about are the physical processes that are going on, which is the softening of the leaf, and then the moisture being evaporated. Then the chemical reactions that they care about are the proteins breaking down into the sugars and the amino acids that become those amazing aromas and flavors that we get from the finished product. And then the caffeine level is increasing too. So all of these processes are going on. The physical characteristics of the leaf, the biological chemistry of the leaf is changing, and those are all going to help it develop into the finished product that we love to drink. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what I'm doing right now is checking to make sure everything is kosher here. Okay, cool. So after the withering, what the people making these teas are concerned about is rolling and shaping. And not all teas go through this process. The main ones that we want to talk about when it comes to rolling and shaping are going to be black teas and oolongs. So I have a couple comparisons here. So I have this milk oolong, which, as you might be able to see there, change the lighting here, is a rolled leaf. And it's green. You can see it maintains its color. And the reason it's maintained its color is because at some point early in the stage of this tea, the producer fired the leaf. And we're going to talk more about that in the next episode. That they heated the leaf so that it would retain the green color. And then they went back and then they rolled it. Either they did it by hand, just rolling it in this kind of a motion, or they had a machine that took that same motion to roll the leaf. And oolongs are going to be all kinds of different ones, right? There's going to be dark oolongs, there's going to be greener oolongs, and some of them are going to be more flavorful, and some of them are going to be more buttery. And then you also have black leaves, black teas. So this one was twisted, and it was either twisted with a machine or was twisted in somebody's hands, but it's a twisted leaf. And the reason why they were manipulated like that is so that it would draw out more oils. It's really going to break the leaf, crease the leaf in such a way as to break down the cellular structures of those leaves. And that's where all the chemistry comes in. So, what I'd like to talk about is the difference between what you see when you're getting like a loose leaf, whole leaf, or partial leaf, like we have here. It'll open up when it's wet, versus crushed hair curl. So when a leaf goes through the crushed hair curl process, it's called the non-orthodox processing, it's going to become dust. Right? It's this tea dust, and you've probably seen that in tea bags, and you can barely see it here, but there's nothing to crush. It's just dust. It brews faster, and there's certainly a place for it. If you want it fast and it's quick and dirty, right? It's like quick and dirty tea, not too concerned about the flavor, not too concerned about the health benefits. You're going to get more health benefits from the other teas because there's those additional oils that are still in the leaf, and you're going to be able to draw out more of the antioxidants and all that good stuff from the leaf when you brew it. But that crushed hair curl is like the smallest bits of tea you can make when you're doing the rolling and the shaping. It actually goes through a processor to crush hair and curl that leaf to make those tiny bits of tea. So, all right, so let's talk about what we just went through. So right now we've gone through plucking and withering and then rolling and shaping of the leaf. Now there's more to it. We're going to talk about next time the drying and the decisions to change the leaf. They might go through these stages multiple times. They might be heated, and then they might go back to being rolled and fired. And we're going to talk about the oxidation of the leaf. And creating this connection between how the leaf is made and knowing what's in your cup, it, in the long run, creates a bigger connection between you and your tea ritual. That's part of the reason why we're going through this, is to create that connection. And you don't necessarily need to know the nitty-gritty about all of this. It's interesting. It's kind of fun for me. I mean, if you're a tea nerd and you want to learn about this stuff, I'm in heaven right now. But when you're sitting and you're having your cup of tea, it's nice to know that it's gone through these processes, that somebody has taken the time to think about and orchestrate the aromas and the flavors that you're getting from your cup of tea. And so next Tuesday, I'm going to talk more about the essential manipulations, the essential steps that manufacturers take to create that final product, that delicious, robust tea that you're going to have, like your black tea or your pu'er or whatever you're drinking. That robust flavor or the delicate flavor is coming from the orchestration of all of these different processes that they're taking us through. So what I'm going to do is, in the comments, I'm going to copy a link to this week's blog, and there's going to be pictures of the different processes that I've been talking about. And it goes a little bit more into detail too. So if you totally want to geek out on it, you can read there. And then also in that blog, I have a link to my 21-day tea ritual challenge. It's something that I do every so often to reconnect with myself. It's 10 minutes a day. It's getting an email in your inbox, just kind of giving you a free little inspiration for your day, motivation for your daily thought process to kind of get you going during your day. So if you want to do that, it's free and you can click on that in the blog. And then until then, thank you so much for watching. Write any questions that you have in the comment section, and next week I will answer anything that I can, and I will let you know if I can't. But it's a learning process for both of us, I think, and I'm going to go through everything you need to know about processing tea and maybe some stuff that you didn't want to know, but we'll get there. Thanks so much for watching.